our docket, which was scheduled for 8:30. This is case number 20-0078, and it deals with a parking structure located at, someone may need to mute, at 911 John Street, located in Columbus, and Columbus's building authorities adjudication number is noted on the docket. Let's have an introduction of the parties. Let's begin with the appellants. State your full name. I'd ask that you spell your last name and the capacity by which you're here in a representative way. We'll do the same thing with the Columbus officials. We'll have an oath administered and we'll get started. Can the appellants enter their appearance, please?
Hi, my name is Matthew Crummy. I'm with Perkins and Will Architects.
Thank you. Is Mr. Ferris? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Bruce Ferris, F-A-R-I-S, and I represent Perkins and Will Architects as the on-site construction administrator.
Thank you. And is Mr. Sapienza present? Take that as no. Okay, Mr. Ghosh.
Amit Ghosh, G-H-O-S-H, Chief Building Official, City of Columbus.
And our fire officials, or official.
Battalion Chief Scott Sanders, City of Columbus Fire Department, Assistant Fire Marshal.
Thank you very much. Okay, if the four of you would stand, raise your right hand. Tammy, if you would administer an oath.
If you raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, very well. Oath has been administered. Mr. Ferris or Mr. Crummy, you have the floor.
Great. I have some exhibits to share. Shall I share my screen?
Please.
So the project that we're here to discuss is located in the city of Columbus, near the confluence of the Olentangy and the Scioto rivers. It's comprised of several parcels that were brownfield sites. And when the developer purchased the land, they divided it into two lots for a two-phase development. Here you'll see the site plan that represents how the parcels were combined. This red line right here was the new property line that demarcates two different lots. And what you see here in gray is the form of the phase 1 office building, and then there's a phase 2 office building. In between the two of them is a terrace. And this next plan is of the garages below the office towers. And the prescriptive requirements of the code would dictate that the two buildings on the separate parcels of land would need to be required by either a 2-hour wall on both sides of the property line or a single 3-hour wall. Our request is to preclude that requirement and allow a single open garage between the two office buildings. And the city report supports us in this request. There's further clarification here in section. You can see the phased office buildings that are noted. The conditioned area office buildings is noted with the blue tone. And the single open garage would be separated from these volumes by a 10-inch concrete slab, which is effectively 3-hour rated. Here you can see where the property line is.
Is this the Cover My Meds building?
Yes, it is.
So I thought, okay.
In Franklin.
All right.
This last image here illustrates what the open garage would look like. There are two more points I'll clarify. The office buildings are fully sprinklered, and there's a single tenant in both buildings. And the way that the properties were recorded, there's joint use agreements in the deed covenants that allow parking across the line and several other joint use agreements. So that's what I have to share. What questions are there?
Gentlemen, questions of Mr. Crummey before we hear from Mr. Ghosh?
I have
Yes,
one.
yes.
Are
go
both
ahead.
garages sprinkled?
Pardon me?
Are both of the garages
The
sprinkled?
garages are not sprinklered. The garages are open garages, and the code does not require sprinklering of the open garages.
I have probably the most simple question. What is the reason why the properties cannot be combined?
There were a couple factors in recording the property that made the recording of the two lots fit with the project schedule. Because of the, and forgive me, I don't fully understand all the intricacies of how lots are recorded in the county, but because both these resultant lots were less than 5 acres, they were able to be recorded in an expeditious manner that met the project schedule. There were also financing benefits. Both properties are financed by separate financing entities.
Are
Does that-
both
So
parcels?
why can't they be combined after the projects are completed?
They're held by different LLCs. The
I
developer,
understand that they are, but they're the same tenant in them as well. I'm sure it's being developed by the exact same developer in this particular case. And the reason why I'm getting that is you're asking us to change the law for you because you just don't want to combine the properties. You know what I'm saying? It's not that I don't agree that maybe we couldn't find a way, but I don't see a good reason for it.
Is the property, is both parcels related to the Cover My Meds construction, or is that include the Orange
Yes.
Barrel? Okay.
it excludes Orange Barrel, and Cover My Meds will be the tenant on both parcels. Mr. Began, maybe I'll answer your question a different way. The fact that would limit or preclude the combining of these lots is they're currently, the banks are separate banks. So there would be, I believe, lien conflicts in combining.
Okay, so again, so you find it easier than, hey, let's have the state of Ohio change the law for us than go back and rework through our financing agreements?
In this request, we are supported by the city, and
I understand that you're supported by the city, but I'm trying to understand, you know, when we do this, right? The Board of Appeals I've been on for quite a number of years here, right? We usually try to have some type of a hardship that says, hey, why do we need to do this? And the fact is you don't need to do it. So I'm looking for some type of way to convince myself that, hey, we need to change the law for this particular group, other than we just don't want to, or it's harder to change things with the banks. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I came prepared to discuss the building code requirements, and unfortunately, I'm not quite as informed on the land transaction. Unfortunately, I think that the owner would be best prepared to address that point, and that's Mr. Sapienza. He was invited to the call, but I don't see him on the call. It's possible he may be having some technical difficulties. I'm going to text him and see if he's going to be able to join.
Yeah, it would show him with a 214 area code.
Yeah. I think I'll actually call him here just to see if I can.
Oh, he's in the lobby.
Oh, great. Great. Okay. He'll be best able to address this question.
Hello, this is Francis Sapienza. I'm sorry.
No, you're.
I've been trying to get in on the audio, and I just figured out I had to call in.
Your entry is timely, but I'm going to have to ask you and indulge you to raise your right hand. And Tammy, would you swear Mr. Sapienza in?
Certainly. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Let me just, Ms. Sapienza, this is Carl Schneider. I chair the board. There's been a dialogue between Mr. Crummy and Mr. Began, who's our architect member, about the financing and the fact that the parcels are separate, have not been combined, and to try to get some handle as to what, if any, hardship is presented by combining the parcels and eliminating that issue. And I guess that's the tee up for you.
Okay. These projects were scheduled to be 2 phases. Phase 1, which was the first parcel, and then in the future, phase 2. We got started on phase 1, so we separated the properties, financed and started construction of phase 1, and Cover My Meds during phase 1's process accelerated their need for phase 2. They were exponentially growing much quicker than they thought, and they released us on phase 2. Phase 2 wasn't supposed to originally start for another year or 2 after we finished phase 1. So they were scheduled as 2 independent parcels. We financed parcel 1 with 1 loan and as one building entity. And then when they released us on phase 2 back in April, we released, or we had to go and refinance or get a second financing for the phase 2 property. So there are 2 independent loans, 2 independent projects, 2 independent buildings from that perspective. So a lot of it was a timing issue. The other thing is that Cover My Meds is a tenant in both buildings. They only have 10-year leases. So there may be a time when, after the first 10-year term, Cover My Meds reduces their need, and we have a second building that will be open for releasing. And so, again, that was the reason for the separation and the 2 different properties.
Okay. Questions of Mr. Sapienza?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just to kind of reiterate, what's to preclude you from combining the parcels right now? I mean, I know it was a timing factor why it was originally, but now they're both going to be constructed. Why can't they be combined now?
Because right now they're financed under 2 totally different loans.
I understand that, and I understand that piece of it. Okay, what I'm trying to, and the question I asked Mr. Crummy is, on our board, you're asking us to change the law for you, right? To make an exception to the law in the state of Ohio for your benefit. So I'm trying to convince myself what the hardship is, right? Other than, geez, it's hard to work through with our financiers a combined property. Maybe it's just easier to ask the state of Ohio to change the law for us. You understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to weigh, and especially, and it's not right now, right? Right now, this is the situation you're in. You already started talking about 10 years from now. So 10 years from now, we are putting a burden on, if you sell this, you're putting a burden on it because they don't have what would normally be required as far as that fire separation. So I'm looking also down the road as well too, and I'm trying to understand what the hardship is, other than, hey, we got to have some lawyers and some banks get together and rewrite the way that the financing is put together. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't seem like a hardship to me.
I just right now at this stage, I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know if we can combine these 2 into 1 loan. that we're dealing with two different properties, two different financial structures, two different loans. I don't know if we can go back and combine this into one loan. That would be totally up to the banks at their discretion. These were financed totally independently, and I can't commit that that's a possibility. We've started construction of both properties under two different loans. I don't know if we can go back and change that now.
Would there be a prepayment penalty, do you think? Do you know? You probably don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, at this point, I don't know. It's just the matter of trying to get two loans combined into one loan is very difficult, especially due to the size of the loans. I mean, these are $200 million loans.
Mr. Beeman, I think, or Mr. Beegan, there's one point I'd like to clarify in that I think that we're not asking for a wholesale abandonment of the intent of the code. There's a nuance here that I didn't point out, which is that the code does allow, under certain conditions, the elimination of party walls between properties, specifically between a anchor in a mall and adjacent facilities. And we believe the intent of that is because there's a benefit to occupants in that situation. We believe that that same benefit translates to this condition. I think it's best illustrated maybe in this section here, in that this campus will effectively operate as a single facility, and having an open garage does provide for better ventilation, better connectivity, better awareness, which we believe is in support of the public good and the public benefit. So to clarify or re-articulate, we're not asking for an abandonment, but rather for the exemption that's already provided for in IBC 706.1.1, for that exemption to be applied to this type B occupancy.
We also have a declaration of covenants between the two properties that allow for shared services across the property lines that include the parking. So that would survive if indeed there was a change in 10 years where we get a new tenant in the building or in one of the buildings, or there is a change in ownership. The declaration of easements and covenants survives that change of ownership and allows for the sharing of this parking, because this parking does support both buildings. These parking decks that are under both towers supports both buildings. So there is a shared agreement that stays in place and even survives the sale.
Okay. Any other questions of either Mr. Crummy or Mr. Sapienza from members of the board? Mr. Ghosh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did support the approach to this, but in my order and in the background, I was led to believe that we were taking an approach that's outlined in section 510.2 of the OBC. This is maybe Mr. Crummy can answer this, that there'd be a 3-hour separation, horizontal separation.
Yes.
Not quite horizontal, but close enough.
Yes.
But that the garage below this will be fully sprinklered as it's required in 510.2, item number 5. And that was my understanding in speaking in support. And I know our legal department has looked at the covenant and they're okay with it. But I just heard that comment that the garages are not going to be sprinklered. Then in that case, we do not meet 510.2.
And that's why I asked that question, Mr. I'd like to hear the fire official's response to that too.
Battalion Chief Sanders here. Fire 100% agrees with Mr. Ghosh We were under the impression that it would be sprinklered also.
But if that, this is Mr. Sapienza, if that is a requirement to do what we're trying to do, we will sprinkle the garage.
All right, let's I think we know where the sort of the line's been drawn in the sand, at least as it relates to the city building and fire.
The line is right down the middle of the property.
That's right. It is almost right down the middle. All right, I'm going to ask my colleagues what their thoughts are here. Mr. Sapienza has indicated a willingness to sprinkler that portion that Columbus City Fire and Building was under the impression would be done. In light of that, what are members' sentiments? And I'll just start. I mean, I do think that I certainly understand Paul's concerns and his questions, but I think that it probably would be a nightmare, which might equate to a hardship, to try to refi $200 million loans to combine these parcels, particularly if the lower level is sprinklered and Columbus is fine with it. So I'll tell you sort of where I'm leaning.
Mr. Chair, I would be fine with it too. I would like to ask Columbus Fire if he's still at this point, even though the sprinkler is not included, if he believes that's a necessary option or if it's a deal breaker or not.
Sergeant?
For fire,
Chief?
yes, for fire, a sprinkler is a must, is a deal breaker for us.
Okay, thank you. I would be in agreement with the variance as long as the parking facilities were fully.
Right, and I've shared the same sentiment.
Mr. Chair, this is Chip Welch. We've dealt with these types of issues before where, you know, buildings are separated by lot lines and whatever, and I'm frustrated to say the least, but I mean, the only way I would see my way to, the only avenue I see to getting a variance is by sprinkling the garages and tying in the fire alarm systems as appropriate.
Right. I mean, what I heard, what I took as being probative was that this development started out, with one objective and Cover My Meds, which is the tenant, got much more aggressive, grew more, hired more employees, and they had to go to phase two. So I certainly understand in the dynamics of land development and commerce how you could have this situation. So there you go.
I guess I'm curious. I mean, whenever I've done a project in the city of Columbus, the first thing is they tell us you have to combine the lots if there are any lots involved. Even, you know, and I guess I understand I follow the financing aspect, but in my world, combining the lots was not a big deal at all. So, I really sympathize with what Paul is saying, that, I'm not sure what happens in the future. In 10 years, when they have two separate lots and one building across them, if it's going to end up back before the board for a use change, and then what happens?
So, Mr. Ghosh, you indicated legal had looked at it. I presume that's the city attorney's office. Is that? I looked at the covenants. Is that something that's normal protocol?
Yes, Mr. Chair. because they're the ones with the legal expertise. Mr. Sapienza sent us the document, and we sent it to our law department and made sure that the agreements to use both sides of the garages between the tenants of the two buildings was going to be maintained in perpetuity. And now that Mr. Sapienza has said that he's willing to sprinkler it, we'll probably need to amend that covenant and say all the life safety systems will need to do the same thing. Our understanding is that it's a concrete garage, poured concrete garage, so it's probably unlikely that it can be demolished without the city knowing. And there are some limitations in the covenant for that too. If they if somebody tries to modify the parking structure that's below it, and it in a way it represents the provisions of Section 510 in the Ohio Building Code.
Okay.
Who maintains then the life safety systems in this case?
We do.
Who is that?
We do as the owner.
Okay, Mr. Sapienza. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, in the future.
Mr. Chair, let me ask the question of Mr. Ghosh then, not that I would want to push this down the road, considering that there is the addition of the sprinkler system and modifications that need to be made to those covenants. Is it worthwhile looking at moving this on and coming back again after they've had a chance to take a look at those changes? Or can we sufficiently condition them here?
Why, I mean, to the satisfaction of the building official, which essentially would be to the satisfaction of the city attorney, I presume.
Yeah, but we would have to do a stepped process, right? I mean, because our normal condition for a scenario like this would be that one of our conditions is that those covenants and restrictions have to be recorded with the Franklin County Recorder. We would have to do a stepped process, a stepped condition of, first, write them up. Second, make sure that the city's okay with it. Third, record them with the county recorder. And we wouldn't be able to, I don't know if that condition that the city reviews it and is okay with it, what happens if that doesn't happen, right? So I'm just wondering, and again, not that I want to push this down the road, but if we took a straw poll to see if the board would be generally in favor of it, and take a little bit of a timeout to allow the appellant to get his ducks in order to sit down with Columbus Fire and Mr. Ghosh again, make sure they got everything worked out, and then come back before for more or less a procedural vote.
What, Mr. Ghosh, what's the need to amend the covenant?
Mr. Chair, and to Mr. Began, there probably will be some details in terms of if there's a fire pump, which property does that fire pump get located on, okay, and what easements or legal arrangements will the owner make for maintaining the sprinkler system along with the garage, and I believe maintenance of the garage is in the covenant already, but we will need to amend the life safety systems in the garage, amend the covenant, and run it by the law department again. So I'm open to either way you choose to proceed. If you want to condition this, we can do that, or if you want to continue this, I'll have to see if I have the time in two weeks or 4 weeks to get this done, but I'll try to do as much as I can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, then thoughts. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Crummy, Mr. Sapienza, is there, you've sort of felt the board out. It looks like the board is generally favorable with a couple asterisks or caveats, namely amend the covenants to satisfy Columbus City and Fire. Would a continuance of the matter cause too much consternation? We could get you on the docket sooner rather than later, although you got to get with the law firm and then the city's got to go through its vetting process. But that's one option. But I'll throw that out there as Mr. Began did, just to get a sense for how the appellants, the property owner, feels about that.
Hey, Carl, couldn't we condition it with the approval of the city and the building and fire official, upon,
That's what I mentioned, and that's what all applied. It's a several step process, so.
And let me throw this out there. I don't even know if the architect or the owner could tell us right now, is it going to be a single sprinkler system? Is it going to be 2 sprinkler systems? And it hasn't been designed yet. So I don't even think we know enough to say, hey, we're going to have 2 fire pumps or there's a lot of details in that system that haven't been talked to yet.
I can field that one. The phase 1, originally, the fire safety system was designed to sprinkler the garage, and we had believed because it was an open garage, it was not required. So phase 1 would be served from phase 1 without a fire pump. We've done the calculations for phase 2. Phase 2 does not require a fire pump. And I suspect because the garage is below the office building that the flow calculations would support it to be fully sprinklered without the addition of a fire pump. Our intent would be to sprinkler each part of the garage from the system on that lot. It would not be a single system for the whole garage, but rather the phase 1 garage would be sprinklered from phase 1 without a fire pump. The phase 2 garage would be sprinklered from phase 2 without a fire pump. And then the alarm system would be interlocked. Does that answer your question, Mr. Began?
It does, and that's fine.
Well, we're not trying to kick the can down the road, but there apparently is some reluctance, or there may be some reluctance by board members to grant a variance with some loose ends just conditionalized. I'm not sure I have that objection, and it doesn't sound like maybe Mr. Gehring has that objection, but let me hear from Chip and Brad. I think Paul does, so.
Mr. Chair, this is Chip. I guess I would prefer to give the city time to sit down with the designer and make sure all of the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. The appropriate documents are filed with the recorder's office. The plans are resubmitted because I'm not an architect or fire protection engineer, but maybe based on the way this building is constructed and designed, there has to be another variance with respect to the sprinkler system. I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable at this point voting on a variance, even though I think we agree on the basic elements of what are going to be required for the variance. I wonder if there are design issues that may come up that we may have to address even after voting on this variance.
Okay, fair enough. Brad?
Yeah, in the past when we've had similar situations, I mean, for example, sharing a generator for emergency power, we wanted to look at the covenants and the agreements before approving it. And I guess I would like to stab the owner. So far it's been, he thinks it would be inconvenient or not, easy to combine the lots, but have some conversation with his lenders or whatever to see what are the real circumstances preventing him from combining the lots. So I'd be in favor of continuing this.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I mean, I guess for the comfort level of the appellant, I can see my way to a variance with respect to make, I apologize, I can't talk this morning. I can see my way to a variance by sprinklering the garages. I would just like to see all the details finalized before voting on that variance. If that gives them a comfort level of where we're going with respect to this.
Mr. Porter, what details would you, what degree or level of details would you want to see included as exhibits?
Well, I guess what I'm.
Yeah, defer to Mr. Ghosh on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that question's answered by the chief and by Mr. Ghosh. I mean, if they're satisfied as the building official and the fire official that it meets the code and it's designed properly and whatnot, then I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm not substituting my judgment for theirs. They've got to live with it at the end of the day and approve those plans. So if that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
Mr. Crummy, usually we see sprinkler schematics. They would show the riser location, and like you say, each building has its own riser. And I don't know that, I know the riser room location, where they are, and they would show that obviously you're sprinklering a building up above, so the demand should be okay. And we will just need we will need something from your sprinkler designer. Say this will probably be automatic dry system with automatic dry standpipes, type 1 standpipes, the class 1 standpipes, and we will need to see schematics and some calculations from your sprinkler designer. And we can turn them around very quickly. Because both buildings will now have dry valves too. Depending on the demand, you may even need a pre-action system.
Well, Mr. Crummy, Mr. Sapienza, the board may be inclined to kick this, continue it. We can certainly set the case down as early as our next hearing. That's probably impractical for what needs to be done on your end, but it looks like we're probably headed towards a continuance that can be a relatively short one if practical. So Mr. Crummy, do you have anything to add, or Mr. Sapienza?
I do not.
I think we can work on we can work with the city and provide the information that they need to feel comfortable with or get comfortable with the idea that we've talked about here in the meeting. And we can try to do that as quickly as we possibly can so we can get back in front of you.
Okay, all right. That being the case, I would entertain a motion to continue.
Yes, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0078, I would move to continue.
Okay, a motion's been made to continue. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Deering has seconded that motion. All those in favor of continuing the matter say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, gentlemen from Columbus City, Mr. Sapienza, Mr. Crummy, the matter's been continued. You'll get notification of our new date. It looks like you've got a lot of light at the end of the tunnel with the board's disposition, but there needed to be this continuance, I think, to get you with the city. So the matter is continued and we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a party for 9 o'clock? I'm gonna get a cup of coffee. If you give me 1 second. Anybody need a restroom break or anything? Tammy, are you good?
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick restroom break, Carl.
Okay, be right back.
Oh,
Yes.
I just want to let you know, I sent Carl a email. I have a pop-up. They're doing installation of applications and software updates on my computer, so I'm going to probably get kicked out, but I'll be back after my computer is shut down, and then I'll join.
Okay, I am having a hard time hearing you, but I understand that you having computer problems and you'll get on as soon as you can.
They're doing updates on my computer, and it's an automatic thing. I can't control it.
Gotcha.
I'll have to restart, so just so you're aware if I disappear, I'll redo it. Thanks.
Okay, again, I can hardly hear you, but I did kind of get the message that you're having some computer issues and you doing updates or something, and that's fine.
Yes, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
It's in and out, Susan.
Wow, okay. Is that better? Is that better?
A little bit.
Sorry about that. It shows 8 minutes till my computer is shut down and then start. So I'll be here for a little bit. I just wanted somebody to know that.
All right, no worries.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have all the board members? Okay. Tammy, you go back on the record, please. Is she there? Yep. Back on the record. We're going to call the second case that was set on our agenda and docket today. That's case number 20-0082. This also is a Columbus matter, deals with the premises located at 1625 Bethel Road in Columbus, and the city's adjudication number is noted on the docket. Let's have an introduction of the parties, beginning with the appellant, property owner and/or property owner representatives. We'll do the same thing with Battalion Chief Sanders and Mr. Ghosh. I'll have an oath administered and started.
This is Matt Althouse with Red Architecture.
Thank you, Mr. Althouse. Is Kevin Jones with you?
Yes.
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 Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ghosh?
Ahmed Ghosh, GHOSA, Chief Building Official, City of Columbus.
And Chief?
Battalion Chief Scott Sanders, Columbus Fire Assistant Fire Marshal. I also have Lieutenant Brandon Huffmaker listening in also.
Thank you. Will he testify?
He will not.
Okay, if Chief Sanders and Mr. Ghosh and Mr. Althouse and Mr. Jones would stand, raise your right hand. Tammy, go ahead and administer the oath, please.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So
I do.
I do.
Okay, and then if you're on a telephone, you might need to mute unless you're speaking. But Mr. Althouse or Mr. Jones, you have the floor.
I'll go ahead and start, introduce the project here. About a year ago, we were, Mr. Jones was approached by the fire marshal to get a certificate of occupancy that would describe the use of his facility a little more clearly. He's in a multi-tenant office building, and he is more of an entertainment use. He has an escape room type of venue. We made the application, and it just kind of led down a rabbit hole of figuring out what to call it exactly. Once we went through the plan examination process, it was determined by the city that we would fall under the special amusement category in 411, which invokes sprinklers and multiple other things with ratings and whatnot. So we're looking at what the special amusement definition is, and don't agree with that application to our project just based on the straight definition of that section. So we're just looking for a reading on that section and if it actually applies to our project. And I don't know if that's, if we're asking for leniency or if we're asking for just an overrule of application of that section.
Sort of undetermined what our authority is. We generally sort of suggest to ourselves we're not an interpretive body, but we will grant relief from what, we generally presume adjudication orders are an accurate interpretation and reading of the code, and then we determine whether we're going to grant relief on that basis. Now that you won't find that anywhere in the statute, but that's, as long as I've been on the board, that's sort of been the protocol that we've taken. Any questions of Mr. Althouse by members of the board at this point in time? All right, hearing none. Mr. Ghosh?
Yeah, let me just, I want to expound on that, Mr. Chair. This is Paul Began. Yeah, I think if you, Mr. Althouse, if you wanted us to take a look at it from your perspective and to kind of reinterpret that, I would probably need a better explanation of why you think that the interpretation is unfair.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a breakdown of the definition of a special amusement in section 411. I can run through each of those if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so per the definition, we must be a temporary or permanent use. We're a permanent use. We're occupied for amusement, entertainment, or educational purposes. It's an entertainment purpose, and contain a device or system that conveys passengers. Our space doesn't have any conveying device like a roller coaster or anything. It's just 3 individual rooms with puzzles in them. Or provides a walkway along, around, or over a course of any direction. The space doesn't have a course. Like I said, it's the use is limited to a single room, and there's a puzzle within it that allows you to finish the game. Nobody's ever locked in the room. Passage sets on the doors and whatnot, and it's clearly marked which door is the exit. Number 5, so that a means of egress is not readily apparent due to visual audio distractions. While there is some low light levels, we exceed the minimum light level for emergency, and we do have exit signs that show the path of egress throughout the space. And then also, there's nothing visually distracting to the room. They're decorated, but the exits are clearly marked. And then lastly, or is readily available because, or is not readily available because the nature of the traction or mode of conveyance through the building or structure. So like I said, each of these rooms is a single room with puzzles that are completed under a time limit. Once you're done or you run out of time, you leave the room, you come out to the lobby and you exit the building. There's no confusing maze-like use in this space. Part one of the attachments, I don't know if you got or not, was our evacuation map. So it shows the 3 different groups of rooms. And then also just as additional information, we're under 49 occupants and we're less than 75 feet of travel. So it's a space with 1 exit, but we do have an exit out the back that is available as a second means of egress. So I guess our argument is that we don't have audio visual distractions. We're not in a maze of any type, and there's no conveyance system. So we don't have those ands or ors applied to our use group or our use of the building. We'd still be we're an amusement or an assembly type space, but since we're under 59 occupants, we applied for a business occupancy.
Have you tried to reach out to the Ohio Board of Building Standards as for an interpretation?
Yeah, so we reached out to ICC actually, and they agreed that without the complexity of what this section is intended for, strobes and neons and mazes and lasers and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't appear to apply. And I do have a written interpretation from the ICC.
ICC does not have jurisdiction here in Ohio, okay. Unfortunately. It's the Ohio Board of Building Standards, okay, that provides those interpretations. You did not reach out to them?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Chief Sanders here, Fire. May I speak on this?
Please.
Okay, the classification of the occupancy as a special amusement building does not allow exceptions to the suppression and alarm requirements. He did mention 411. If you dig in a little deeper to 411.4, 411.5, and 411.6, a suppression system and alarm system are required by both the Ohio Building Code and the Ohio Fire Code, no exceptions.
Right, and we're saying this section doesn't apply.
Right.
And Fire believes that it does.
We understand.
Well, I have a question for you. I'm just looking at some of the correspondence that went on here. An official at the City of Columbus said he looked at similar sites where they have escape rooms and where guests have comments that they are locked in. And the owner speaks about breaking out. So there's a perception that people are blocked in these rooms and they have to solve a puzzle in order to get out. You're saying that's not the case?
Correct. Kevin, would you like to kind of explain how you get people in and out of the space?
Yeah, so we have all our rooms reach off of our lobby. There isn't any locking hardware on any of our doors except for exterior and those that go to common areas of the building. Escape rooms started a long time ago where they would do that, but I have been to over 100 and some escape rooms throughout the US and never been to one that actually locks people in. It would be unsafe. We know that. We know about an incident that happened in Poland in a private apartment where some people were injured because they were locked in. It's just an unsafe practice, which is why we just put people in the room. They can come and go as they please. If they want to step out, go to the bathroom, they have that ability. There's no locking of any customers in the room.
So what's the point? How does this work?
It's like any board game. There's a goal you're trying to achieve, and once they achieve it within the given time limit, they win the game. In one, it might be to find a hidden gem, and another to figure out who a murderer was. So there's no way to escape. In fact, the better definition of an escape room right now would be a puzzle room. They're called escape rooms, kind of like a tissue might be called a Kleenex. It's just the way it has been, and branding and marketing, but never any locked in customers.
Well, I mean, so what's the point? Are they competing against someone, or, I mean, what's the point going in there and solving a puzzle and leaving?
They're merely competing against time. It's multiple puzzles in a room. You might think of like one of our rooms has an oversized tanagram, which is, a child's puzzle. You're trying to fit a bunch of shapes and form a square. But that leads to another puzzle and another one. They get clues along the way. So they're just trying to achieve a goal of defeating all the puzzles within a given time and then exit the room on their own.
So what if they don't do it in a certain period of time?
They lose the game.
And also to kind of expound on that, Kevin's got time slots available. Obviously, you're timed in the game, and then just in the given environment we're in right now, he's got a cleaning period afterwards. So he's holding people accountable to the time that they're in the room, so he can then clean the room and get more people in the room, just as on a routine schedule. So solving the puzzle is the goal, but if you don't, you're done. I mean, it's kind of like any roller coaster ride. You get 2.5 minutes of fun and you're done.
People pay for this?
Yeah. It's a giant craze, yes.
People will wait in line 2 hours for a roller coaster for a 2-minute thrill.
This is Neil Gehring. Are these individual rooms monitored by cameras, or?
Yes, we have full CCTV in every room, and then we have employees who monitor the game. They do not leave the camera station the entire time that a game is being played.
And you did mention, I thought I read that the doors are unlocked, for restrooms and other kind of issues.
Yes, there's not even locking hardware on the door.
Right, it's a team building event.
Yes.
Yeah, so initially when we were as Red Architecture trying to figure out what to call it, we took it kind of as that team building mentality, like what would we do as a group here at the office at the architecture firm? We'd go to a conference room and put a puzzle together or whatever. Kind of the same concept. There's 3 conference rooms where no more than 9 people are in, and they're discussing a problem. In this case, it's it's a puzzle. So we looked at it kind of as a business use that could kind of be considered assembly because it's all just conference and meeting rooms. And then that's how we got into it, finding more out about this special amusement as we went.
Did you get any estimates on a suppression system?
No, we didn't, but the building's not sprinklered, and it's a multiple tenant building. It would take a bit to get it, retrofitted in. Kevin, did you look into that?
Well, yes, I contacted ADT and had them come out and kind of look at a fire alarm system. But in the process of getting these, they also contacted the person who was doing our inspections from the Columbus Fire Department, and they were told to hold off because they told the ADT person to hold off because no decision had been made yet. So ADT hasn't provided anything from me from that aspect. from a fire alarm system. No, nothing on a suppression system though.
He looks at it. This is Chief Sanders. I'm certainly not questioning you on this, but I have no record of that conversation.
All right. Any other questions of Mr. Jones, Mr. Althouse, from members of the board? We've heard from Chief Sanders. I'm not sure, have we heard from Mr. Ghosh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand with the Columbus Fire Division's decision.
All right. Members of the board, thoughts, comments?
I guess I'll start. I agree with the city's code interpretation. I mean, I think it's the right application. I don't know that, and Neil can speak better to this than I can, but the difficulty of installing a suppression system in an existing building for one single tenant where there's no infrastructure already in place could be monumental at best. I guess where I boil down to is I would support the variance with an alarm system in the space.
This is Neil, and that's why I asked that question, Chip. It would be a monumental task to sprinkle a couple rooms in an existing office facility, plus the inconvenience on the other tenants. I too would support the variance with an alarm system, but I would like to know Columbus's Fire, if that was the condition we would put on this variance, what their opinion on that would be.
Chief?
Columbus Fire would require an alarm system as well as a suppression system based on 411.4.5.6.
Let me ask the question. I mean, is 411.4 does not necessarily, do we pass those threshold requirements that are, is this more than 5,000 square feet?
No.
I mean, and again, I'm not the architect on this one. Mr. Althouse is here too. I'm looking at 411.3, and it looks like to me that the sprinkler system is not necessarily required because they meet the exceptions there. I mean,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
There is an exception in the building code in that's what Mr. Began is referring to. Now, what Mr. Althouse has not established that the travel distance to any point of the exit from any part of the tenant space is less than 50 feet.
Want to address that, Mr. Althouse?
Right. In my study, it was of our tenant space it's a single space with a single exit. It's less than 49 occupants and less than 75 feet. We weren't asking for the exception to the sprinkler system because the section doesn't apply to us because we don't fit the definition. We're still just an assembly use in a business building. I guess that's our argument. We're arguing that this doesn't apply, so the sprinklers don't apply, the alarms don't apply.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Began, so the exceptions, to my understanding, do not apply. And that's where the sprinkler sprinkler system is triggered.
Well, let me ask Mr. Ghosh this question here. I mean, are you looking to exit out of the building or exit out of the space? I mean, it says to exit, It doesn't say to, outside of the building or to an enclosed stairwell. I mean, is it sufficient in this particular case, or how this exception would be applied as an exit out of the tenant space? Into a rated corridor. I'm just asking the question.
It'll have to be a exit passageway or an exit according to the way it's written. So something with a rating and something with rated doors, I would agree. I concur with you that it'll have to be something rated, something protected, or directly to the outside.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and follow up. Mr. Welsh had said, I think I would be inclined to, at this point, uphold the adjudication order only because, even though I could see Mr. Alhouse's point, Mr. Ghosh and the chief, in this case, I believe, are very consistent. We've seen a couple of these come before our board before, and as special amusement buildings. I think, when there's a tie, you go with the more conservative approach, of which I believe would be to call this a special amusement building. So just kind of what's being appealed at this point in time, I would say that I would want to uphold at this point. That being said, it may be advantageous to the appellant for us to continue this. And if the rest of the board members feel the same as I do, maybe come back and we would craft a variance if a sprinkler system is required. Again, assuming that would be supported by Mr. Ghosh and Columbus Fire.
Other members?
I would, at this point, support a variance, but strictly because, I know they're following the letter of the law here, but I really think that there is not in this situation, the exit path is not confounded or anything like that. So, but, on the same side, I would be interested in having a continuance to see what can be done, as Paul's suggesting. So.
All right, Neil and Chip.
I'm not 100% clear on what a continuance would, Paul, how a continuance would aid this case. I mean, if we grant a variance contingent with an alarm system in lieu of a sprinkler system, what is the necessity or the benefit to a continuance?
And let me throw it out to this. The reason why I propose it, Neil, is that the request by the appellant right now is for us to overrule the building department's calling this a special amusement building, which I don't believe, from the questions, that we are willing to do that. So now they need to shift gears and look at, hey, is the sprinkler system required? So Mr. Althouse would have to go back and take a look at, hey, is the exit out of the tenant space, is that a rated passageway or not? Does he meet the exception requirements to even look at to see if a sprinkler system is required? And then instead of having us uphold it and have them refile, if we continued it, we could grant a variance to that with a different request, because we don't necessarily have that request at this point in time.
Okay, I follow you.
I agree with that rationale, Mr. Began. I still think I can get to I can support a variance, but I don't agree with Paul that the issue that I agree on is not before us at this point. The only issue before us is the classification of the space.
Well, that's my question though. Is that correct? I mean, so many times we face appellant arguments that say that the building department misinterpreted and misapplied the code. And so we're arguing that was misinterpreted, but in the event you determine that us to be wrong in that regard, we ask for relief. I mean, isn't that really where we are? Notwithstanding our disagreement over the interpretation, we want relief. So, I mean, it may be before us, and I say that with some ambiguity because I don't know.
Well, I understand your point. Historically, at least in my time on this board, we've never entertained the idea of questioning the building official's classification of the space or the structure or whatever. We've been
once or twice we have.
Yeah, but I mean, they were extremely egregious. I mean, but that all being said, I guess maybe the underlying issue here is, and respectfully, Columbus Fire has taken the position that they think the space needs to be sprinklered. And before, I guess for my comfort level, before I'm willing to jump up against Columbus Fire in this position, in this situation, I want to make sure that the architect has done their due diligence and has sat down with the city to make sure that everybody can come to the same page before I just take a broad brush and say the heck with the sprinkler system. I mean.
Okay, all right, I certainly understand that rationale. Mr. Althouse, you want to comment on what you've heard thus far?
So let me just kind of recap what I'm hearing is we want to, a couple of the board members agree with doing a variance to the sprinkler system with the inclusion of a fire alarm system, or we would do a continuance to further discuss with city officials on how we're applying the code, and come back and discuss with all parties kind of on the same page.
For sure, the latter, it's correct. Some board members have indicated they could find their way to a variance imposing a fire alarm condition, but I don't know that we have 3 members that would do that today.
Mm-hmm. I guess I guess I suppose it's my duty to further discuss with Mr. Ghosh and the fire chief why we don't consider our space a special amusement just because we don't fit the definition of it. Is with a continuance we could do that? Is that not something we would do on this call today right now?
Right, that is correct.
Okay.
I will go ahead and throw it out. I mean, we could take a straw poll, but you know, as Mr. Welsh had said, you could talk as much as you want to Mr. Ghosh and the chief, but my guess is, as we have seen other cases here, they're not going to bend and not calling this a special amusement building. So I think, and at least from a couple members of this board, we're not willing to overrule the building official and fire official in this particular case. So my guess is you're probably going to have to live with the fact that it's a special amusement building. And given that, those ramifications of that, you know, would a variance assist you and your client to gaining that certificate of occupancy in an easier manner?
So I guess another way, Mr. Althouse, of what Mr. Began is saying is, if we work off the presumption of this being a special amusement and the city's steadfast in requiring a sprinkler system, then coming back to us for a variance on the sprinkler system with a demonstrable quote of X hundreds of thousands of dollars versus the fact that you're spending $50,000 to renovate the space to create this attraction, is probably easier sell for this board than arguing the classification.
Sure, and I guess to clarify, I guess we didn't really mention this, is it's an existing space. We're not remodeling anything. We were just trying to follow the fire marshal's orders to reclassify the space on our certificate of occupancy.
Right.
So regardless, you know.
All right, I think the writing's on the wall then, that we're going to continue this matter, Mr. Aldhouse, Mr. Jones, allow you to sort of take a step back, regroup, get with Mr. Ghosh and the chief. And we could do this sooner rather than later, like I indicated in our preceding hearing that ended up being continued as well. We can set you down sooner rather than later so that we don't disrupt timing and schedule. Any objection if we continue it, Mr. Aldhouse, at this point?
No.
Okay. All right. I understand. All right. I would entertain a motion to continue.
Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0082, I move to continue.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair, Neil Gearing.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, gentlemen, well presented. You know, we've got a couple sticking points here, but I think we can move down the road. Matter will be continued. You'll receive notification from Ms. Steer as to the next date. If there's a reason to accelerate that, you know, for the next meeting, just let her know. She's pretty good about trying to accommodate on our docket people that need to get in. Otherwise, if nothing further on this, we'll stand adjournment.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Anybody need a break? Tammy?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Susan, do we have the parties for 10 o'clock? It is 9:38. So, no, 9:30, I'm sorry, for 9:30. Do we have the Trayview Road parties?
Yes, this is Dennis Perry with AECom.
Okay, and then is Mr. Bussin and Miss Lux with you?
I see he's on separately, I believe.
Okay, Mr. Bussin is?
I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then is Kathy Lux going to appear today?
Actually, I'm on her computer. She's by me here. We're in the
okay.
office with our mask on, socially distancing.
All right, and I know we have Chief Sanders and Mr. Ghosh. Is there any reason why we couldn't advance the hearing by 10 minutes?
No.
Oh, well, it isn't by 10 minutes because it's 9:30. We're actually beyond. I keep looking at mine. I think I got dyslexic this morning. All right, so we're going to call this case. It's a Columbus jurisdictional matter. It's case 20-0087. Deals with the premises located at 5101 Trayview Road in Columbus. Columbus Building Authority's adjudication order number is noted on our docket. If I'd have go ahead, Mr. Perry and Mr. Busin and Miss Lux, enter your appearance. I'll do the same thing with Mr. Ghosh and I and Chief Sanders, and I'll have an oath administered. Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Well, I'm asking you to enter, we're now on the record, so go ahead and enter your name, which is enter your appearance, and then we'll do the same thing.
Okay, yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah,
okay.
Dennis Perry, architect.
With AECom.
With AECom.
Gotcha. And Ms. Lux?
Hello, my name is Kathy Lux, and I'm also with AECom.
Okay, Mr. Busin?
This is Tim Busin. I'm with UPS.
Thank you. Mr. Ghosh?
I'm with Ghosh, Ghosh. Chief Building Official, City of Columbus.
And Chief?
Battalion Chief Scott Sanders, Columbus Fire, Assistant Fire Marshal.
Okay, very good. If each of you would stand, raise your right hand. Tammy, you can administer the oath.
Yes. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
Okay, Mr. Perry or your colleagues, you have the floor.
Okay. First, I guess, thanks everybody for taking the time to chat with us today on this item for UPS. A little bit of history, I guess, specifically. Our company provided architectural engineering services for UPS for the expansion of their facility at Trayview. From the original facility that was built in 1986. When that was completed, well, actually, as part of that expansion, it was done in two phases. There was an addition of about 250,000 square feet and an existing renovation of 250,000 square feet. It's a class 2B S1 use unlimited area building. And we worked with the City of Columbus on various other specific code items on that project. As part of the renovation, which was the second portion, there were some renovation parts to the associate support areas. However, due to funding limitations, some of those were removed from the project. And then as the facility was completed, both the addition and the renovation, the owner realized they had the need for some additional break room space for their associates when they take their coffee breaks or the 15-minute breaks or the lunch breaks. So what they had done is they went ahead and they procured 3 prefabricated units and placed them on site to address this need. They placed them near the unlimited area building on the north facade. And then essentially, then Tim gave us a call and said, well, we would like to get this ran through the building department to make sure it's all permitted and in accordance with building codes and protecting the associates properly. So then we went out and looked at the situation and reviewed that in context with the requirements of the OBC and decided that we felt that there was a reasonable argument that could be made for accepting this installation with some modifications to it. So essentially, I'm sorry?
No, you're fine. You just had some background noise, I think, on your part.
Oh, okay. So I think what I'd like to do, if I can, is bring up a site plan just to kind of show you the information. This was also information that was submitted along with the requirements from Susan Steer. But 2B. Okay, you should be able to see this here in a minute.
We haven't.
Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, so essentially what we did that when we did the analysis and we thought the best thing to do would have it be a preliminary plan review with the City of Columbus, which we did. Met with some of their folks and eventually I spoke with Amit on this. But this shows the north end of the facility, and the pink area is the area of the 3 trailers that are put onto the site. Now this is an unlimited building, and as typical for package sortation facilities, the fire department access loop runs around the building and actually around the trailer parking spaces. So anyway, this shows the location of the break room trailer units. So then if I go to the next, let me go to another slide here that shows you a little bit 2A. Then this is an attachment that's in a little more detail. Now this is rotated, but this shows the footprint of the building, and it also shows what's provided with that building in terms of number of exits, and also I guess access, and how the associates get out of the main facility, which is to the left, and into the break rooms. The issue on this, of course, is twofold, I believe. One is that the construction of the trailers is what would be considered a 5B construction. And of course, the unlimited area building is a 2B construction. And so what we were proposing, in as much as there is a separation distance for the break room area from the building, that the precast concrete walls serve as a fire separation wall, which should give us in excess of 2 hours separation, and then the imaginary line would run almost parallel with the outside face of that wall, and then the trailer units, which would be the break room. Then recognizing that it's about a 2,000 square foot break room. It's about 36 by 60. And again, it's a one large open space, and it has the 3 exits. And then also in recognition that it is a type 5B construction, and it falls within the distance nearest to the building, that we would also propose extending the fire protection system from the main facility into the break room. So essentially, that's kind of the background on this. When we looked at it, we thought that would be, if we were building this break room, say, remote from the building, a further distance, which, you know, doesn't really work operationally, in as much as the associates have limited time to get out of the main building, go take their break, come back to the main building. If we put it outside the loop that is the truck drive as well as the fire department access, it would be create a higher level of risk for the associates, as they would have to transverse across that. But if we were building it someplace else, given the use group of it's an A2, of course, into the break room, and it's around 2,000 square feet in construction type 5B, it would even, if it was built separately, it would not require sprinkling based upon those parameters. But we're thinking if we were to sprinkle this here, and then the fact that we have an existing 2-hour fire separation wall, that would be a reasonable accommodation to achieve an equivalent level of life safety.
Okay, questions of Mr. Perry?
Just a question about the existing exterior wall. Am I understanding correctly that that existing wall is already a 2-hour wall, or is there modifications to that wall that you need to do to make it a 2-hour wall?
The existing wall is a nominal 12-inch precast with insulation in the middle. So if we go to chapter 7, I want to say 721, that we would be able to, a prescriptive analysis of that would get us that weight rating.
Okay.
Now there is one door that they come out of that currently is an exterior door, but is not rated. So we would, as part of the work, would propose removing that frame and that door and replacing it with a rated assembly.
Any other questions, Mr. Perry? Mr. Ghosh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our mind, it's a reasonable request, and I believe Mr. Perry has offered to sprinkler the trailer to ordinary hazard group 1 density. So he conceivably will have probably 20 sprinkler heads in there at 100 square feet per head. So it'll be well protected with sprinkler heads, and he's got the 2-hour wall. And we'll make sure that that tilt-up wall does meet 2-hour rating. And if fire caulking is needed between the panels, we will make sure that that gets done, to Mr. Beegan's point. And so we think it's a reasonable request.
Chief Sanders?
Fire is also in agreement with Mr. Ghosh. With the sprinkler system, we're very satisfied.
All right, questions of Mr. Ghosh or Battalion Chief Sanders, members of the board?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Paul Beegan, for the fire chief. Just the location of these industrialized units. I mean, one of the requirements is having that 60 feet around the building, an unlimited area building, so that you can effectively combat a fire all the way around the building. I just wanted clarification that the location of these units is not going to prohibit you and your personnel from attending to any emergency that would be at this facility.
I believe the building was going to be 58 feet, very close, and with the sprinkler, we're satisfied that would cover that situation.
Okay. And then one more question, probably for the appellant here. Does the industrialized unit already have a fire alarm system, or is this something that would be installed?
It does not have a fire alarm system. We could take and connect it to the existing building system, so it would operate in concert with that.
Okay, and then follow-up question then probably for Mr. Ghosh and the chief. We're talking about adding a sprinkler system to this. Is the request also a belt and suspenders approach of fire alarm and sprinkler system?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Beegan, yes, yes, Mr. Beegan, that is correct. Whatever fire protection they have in the building, visual alarms and so forth, will need to be extended and into the trailer and for early warning.
Okay.
Okay, comments and or sentiments of members of the board?
I have a question. I have a question for the architect. Why 10 feet from the building? Why not 20 feet?
Well, if we move it out, can you go back to that? Yeah, I'll go back to that site plan. If we, well, the other one, yeah. If we move it out, if we move it north, then it's going to get into the drive lane, which is actually the perimeter access around the building for the fire department. So if we move it north, and if we move it even further north and say that if we go across the drive lane that surrounds the building, which is used both by the trucks as they are backing their semis up into the dock spaces, and also would serve for the fire department access around the complete loop around the building. Then if we go across that, then we will be putting a lot of associates at risk as they go out for their break, going across traffic lanes that are typically quite used quite heavily.
Okay. Now I'll invite comments from members of the board.
Carl, this is Neil. I'm fine with the variance with the proposed conditions.
I am as well, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Paul looks like he's at his computer, must be doing some conditions.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I am paying attention. I am preparing some conditions, so if we would like to
Take a short break.
take a short recess, I will finish putting these together.
And this might just end up being the first one we don't continue today. We stand in recess, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Chair, as soon as you want to get back on the record, I do believe I have some
Do we have
additions.
Chip's with us too? Yep, let's, we'll go back on the record, Tammy. Are you going to post those?
Yes, I am. I'm working on that right now.
Do you see those, Mr. Perry?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Ghosh?
Okay.
I'm sure I'll see in a minute, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I will read through these proposed conditions. This variance is conditioned upon the following. Number one, an alternate automatic sprinkler system shall be installed in the industrialized units to the satisfaction of the building and fire official. Number two, an alternate fire alarm system shall be installed and maintained in the industrialized unit comprising of system smoke detectors with integral heat detectors throughout the entire structure, audible/visual devices throughout the entire structure, and pull stations at all identified means of egress. The alternate fire alarm system shall be interconnected to the alarm system of the main building. Number three, the alternate automatic sprinkler system and fire alarm system shall be considered required systems and listed as such on the certificate of occupancy by the building official. Number four, the alternate automatic sprinkler system and fire alarm system shall be maintained as required systems utilizing the Ohio Fire Code and adopted NFPA standards. Number five, the existing exterior door into the main building shall be removed and replaced with a rated door to the satisfaction of the building and fire officials. Number six, this variance is granted based on the use, construction, occupant load, square footage, and level of activity identified on the approved construction documents, including the maintenance of all building systems and any conditions required herein.
Mr. Perry, Mr. Ghosh, Chief Sanders, thoughts or comments with respect to those proposed conditions?
I believe,
Or
and
questions?
I would look for Tim Busen to comment if not, but I believe those would all be acceptable.
Mr. Busen?
I'm fine with those conditions.
Mr. Ghosh, Chief Sanders?
I'm in agreement, Mr. Chair.
Fire is also in agreement.
Very well.
Hey, Paul, one grammatical change on number 2, second line. I think it should be industrialized units comprising of a system. Because there are multiple units attached together, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I can change that.
Okay, is there any need to read that?
I don't believe so. It just in item number 2, modifying industrialized unit to industrialized units.
Okay, with that, is there a motion to make that would consider the amended proposed conditions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0087. The appellant is BT-OH LLC, and for the premises 5101 Trabb Road, Columbus, Ohio 43228. The appellee is Amit Ghosh, building official for the City of Columbus Building Department, and adjudication order number A/O 2020-008. I move to grant the variance subject to the conditions previously read in the record and noting the no objection of the building and fire officials.
Very well, that motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Matter is unanimously carried. A variance granted on those conditions. Anything further to come before the board on this case? If not, that concludes this case. We stand in adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Does anyone need a break before we call our last case?
Yeah, just a quick few moments, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Thank you. We'll go off record, Tammy.
Is everyone back, Mr. Chair? I don't see Neil yet. And you are muted, Carl, just in case you.
Right. Yeah, I don't see Neil back yet.
All right.
Oh, Neil is back. Okay, good. Okay, Tammy, we'll go back on the record.
Okay.
I think we have the parties present for our 10 o'clock case. I'm going to call a matter that's a Hillsborough jurisdictional case. It's a case that was set for 10 o'clock, noting it's 10:23 right now. It's case number 20-0040, and it deals with the premises located at 122 North High Street in Hillsborough, and Hillsborough Building Authority's adjudication numbers noted on our docket. I'd ask that we have an appearance of the parties representing the appellant first. State your full name, spell your last name, so we have that down for the record and the capacity by which you're here in a representative way. We'll do the same thing with the building department and fire official, and to the extent fire official is present, and we'll have an oath administered and we'll get started. And we can begin with Mr. Neighbor.
Hi, my name is Paul N-A-B-E-R.
Thank you.
Could we repeat that, Mr. Chair? It was a little bit garbled. I'm sorry.
Paula Neighbor. N-A-B. Go ahead.
N-A-B as in boy, E-R.
And then who's appearing with you?
I'm in my office with Tony Weissman, W-E-I-S-M-A-N-N.
Thank you.
The former CDO of.
Okay. All right, very good. Mr. Riviera.
Yes, my name's Steve Rivera. That's R-I-V-E-R-A, and the current building official for City of Hillsborough.
Okay, and is Brianne Abbott with you?
She may be on a separate line. I know she's been having some trouble getting on. You may ask if see if she's present.
Yes, I don't see her. Susan, did you see anybody else?
No, that would be it.
Okay. Can we still proceed in her absence?
Well, she had contents about the purchase of the lot. I may have some information for you, but she did submit some documents that you could refer to.
Right, and we have those.
Okay.
Okay, let's do this then. Let's have each of the parties stand. Raise your right hand. Tammy, would you administer an oath?
Certainly. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Neighbor and/or Mr. Weissman, you have the floor.
Okay, so I am the property owner of 122 North High Street in Hillsborough. I purchased the property back in November of 2018. I met with Mr. Weissman and the safety service director at the time, Mel McKenzie, to go over some issues and kind of give him an idea of what I was planning on doing. We talked, we met several times, and you know, we came up with a plan. Sorry, this reverberate.
Yeah, you're just, I don't background noises.
So then I proceeded to get, you know, the architects involved and get drawings made up. I submitted everything to the city of Hillsborough for permits. And I was told that everything looked good. I also went to the DRB in November of 2018, and the DRB is the Design Review Board for Hillsborough, and I came up with drawings and plans and sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Materials and things like that to show them what I was planning on doing. They approved it. So I went and got permits. The permits were reviewed. The permits were approved. And I thought everything was fine. Part of what we were doing was purchasing 12 feet of property on the extension to put the external staircase to the building so that the tenants on the second floor could have access to the floor. And I'm sorry?
That was your own echo.
Oh, okay, sorry. We met with the Hillsborough Area Community Development Corporation, the assistant to the mayor, everybody agreed. I signed a contract. I gave them a check for $5,000. And that's the last I heard until March of this year, when I'm being told that none of it is any good anymore. I applied, I applied for a renewal back in February, or actually end of January, and was told that there were some issues and that I needed a site plan and I needed all this other stuff. And, you know, so now I'm here, you know, I mean, I'm here, you know, I don't know why I'm being told that things aren't right when I had approval. I had approval, you know, last year. And I've had no correspondence for 60 days after I applied for the renewal.
Okay. Let me, I think this is probably a good segue. First of all, any questions of members of the board of Ms. Neighbor at this point in time, or maybe we should hear from Mr. Rivera as to the genesis of the stop work order. Let's do that. Mr. Rivera?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Wiseman was the building official at the time, and when those permits were issued, I had to sign those permits because Mr. Wiseman noted that he had a conflict of interest. I did not know what the conflict at that time was. So I went ahead, because it was a conflict and I was the backup building official at the time, I went ahead and signed those. Since then, it did not come up again into my preview until an extension was asked for. And in that extension, I went ahead and asked for the documents to find out what was the status of the project. It was at that time when I realized that there were some issues with the permit. First being that it is a mixed use building with an R2 and an A2. It's a restaurant down at the first floor, and then apartments, 3 apartments on the second floor. The way this was submitted was there was 3 individual residential permits and then 1 commercial permit. And then looking further into it, I noticed that the plan review that was submitted with Dan Miller on January the 30th, he specifically stated that it was for a footer foundation phase approval only. So it was at that time I went ahead and requested some additional documents and reached out to Tony at the time to see if, because he was the contractor, to see if he can submit any additional information or if any additional information was provided. He went ahead and gave me the same set of drawings that Mr. Miller reviewed, and it was for foundation only. Later, I found out through the city, or the city notified me, that the contract never was fulfilled and that it was being built on city property. So I felt at that time it was necessary to issue a stop work order so we can get everything back on track. And that's pretty much where we stand today.
Mr. Wiseman, do you anything to add?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I was a CBO at the time of the permit being issued, and I've known this neighbor probably 25 years and consulted on multiple projects with her, with Steve Schaefer and a couple other people that I had with Wolpert and Nutting back in the day. And I felt it was kind of, since I was being kind of her eyes on the project and a sounding board, that I should step aside a little bit. Since I was actually on the property, it was 3 doors from City Hall. I would be actually at the property almost daily. And on this particular case, like many others in Hillsborough is a rural community in Highland County, and they had a bit of an antiquated building department. I was the first building official for the building department as a full-time employee as they were establishing a renovated building department. At the time that these permits were issued, the city ordinance was somewhat antiquated as far as what the board requires and the building department requires by today's standards on applications to fulfill any permit approvals or review approvals. I subcontracted the plan review process out to Dan Miller out of the Dayton, Ohio area. That is correct, as Mr. Rivera said. Mr. Rivera was a contract electrical inspector and backup CBO for me also. So that is, that is verifiable. On this particular project, this building is a 200-year-old building, mixed use. However, the city ordinance had a specific set of permits. Why we asked Paulette Goyer from the city of Hillsborough, who was the permit clerk at that time, to verify. The permit process or application process involved specifically if the property was used for residential, a residential permit was issued. If it was more than 1 unit and had separate electric meters, it had to have a separate permit. And commercial building, any type of commercial, were straight under their commercial permit process and applications. They were not set up at that time when these permits were issued to have mixed use permits issued. We had corrected that subsequently after these permits were issued. This was the first case that we ran into in my tenure there of approximately 4 months at the time that this application came in. It took us about 3 months to get it through council, through the hearings and the readings, to have the new ordinances installed and the new permit process established. So these came in originally correctly. They were applied for by the applicant correctly. Permits, in my mind, were issued correctly. We being the Safety Services Director, Mel McKenzie, the mayor himself, we had some issues, or I had an issue, even though they were utilizing the old permit process. How would we address this 12-foot by 25-foot wide addition to the rear of the building? And their consensus, me staying out of it, trying to stay transparent here, was that, well, it's servicing the 3 units upstairs, not the downstairs commercial spots, so that's going to fall under the residential permits. So we took it in that way. We also had a bit of an issue with the materials on the siding. The Design Review Board, which is a Hillsborough entity, had required certain materials being utilized, and those materials were met and designed upon in some artist renderings. Ms. Neighbor took to the hearing, and all that was approved, so she submitted that with their approval. The mayor and Mel McKenzie himself then said they had no problem, since this particular property was surrounded by municipal property, alleyway, and street frontage on all four sides. The distance for fire offset rating is a little on the shy side on some areas, but the minimal amount we looked at as a trade-off. There was an existing wood shed type structure, story and a half tall, built on the rear of the building, which was removed. And then this structure was going to be taking its place and rebuilt in a more permanent and more sound modern fashion to basically be a roof-in staircase or a roof-covered stairway, non-conditioned space, but walled for security and support. That is what the presented plan was. The inside of the building itself, on the first floor, was one large area with a restaurant in the back, a small partition half wall, and two walled-in bathrooms. The bathrooms were partition walls, and their scope was basically to enlarge them to meet ADA requirements. As the project progressed, 7 or 8, 10 layers of paneling were peeled off the exterior walls. 3 or 4 layers of carpeting over top of each other with masonite, with peel and stick tile, and then more carpeting was all removed from the building. Once we got down to the meat and potatoes and saw what the contractors had exposed, we found out that a lot of the floor joists were heavily deteriorated. That was taken back to Darren Schweikert of DS2 Architects and Ms. Neighbor, and a decision was made to replace a lot of the floor joists. Unfortunately for Ms. Neighbor, that escalated to about 80% of the floor joists on the first floor. So the only change in scope on this whole project became the enlargement of the project by replacing the floor joists, which were basically changed with like or better. The existing were in there as air-dried timber, probably 200 years old. And what was replaced was southern yellow pine and treated number 2 yellow pine lumber on the floor joist system.
Permits gained for any of that additional work?
I'm sorry?
Were permits obtained for any of that additional work?
The additional work was considered as like material, and the drawings were drawn up by DS2 in July of 19 and submitted to the city at that time. The floor is a clear.
Now, who made that decision? Was that your decision at the time to make that no permit was required for replacing 80% of the floor?
No, sir. Mel McKenzie, the safety director, and the mayor decided that. I stayed out of the decision process because of the direct involvement with the neighbor.
And I'll let you continue, but let me ask a pointed question about that. Do you have financial or ownership interest in this project?
I have financial, but not on the investment side, actually the opposite. I've got a lot of time invested on this as the CBO, but I do not have an ownership or financial investment, no.
You are not being compensated for your consultation?
No, sir.
So just out of the generosity of your heart, you're assisting Ms. Neighbor?
I've done this on a number of properties for other people in the city of Hillsborough, and yes, that is correct.
Okay, go. You can continue.
I tried to just, again, to stay transparent on this. I myself stayed distant as far as the legalities go and decision went. If I had an idea or a thought, I would share it with those who needed to be and let those higher up the administrative line make a decision in our office. Most of Hillsborough was not doing permits of anything at that time when I came on board, and it was basically still, no offense meant, but sort of like the Wild Wild West out there. And I came from Montgomery County, city of Cincinnati, city of Franklin. I've worked with Paul Meyer before, and Mari, and everybody else through 25 years of being in this industry, to know that I need to keep my nose clean and my paperwork clean. And when there's decisions to be made, to let the appropriate members make those decisions, hence why the appeal was filed here. I have some problems. I think that if Hillsborough was in an ideal setting and was up to date with everything on their permits, we should have had more paperwork here originally. However, it was not, and by ordinance, I did not do more than I did at that time. I had to utilize the facts, the paperwork and the procedures that were on the table in front of me, which were the same procedures and paperwork that was available to everyone walking in off the street, which included Walmart, US Bank, a number of the hospital renovation, a lot of big projects in the area, which we did not get appropriate paperwork for, only because city ordinance did not provide for the necessity of that at that time. However,
let me ask you, Mr. Weissman, are you, as your role as the chief building official at the time, did you not have to administer the Ohio Building Code, or are you saying by city statute you did not have to?
the city statute said that we enforced the 1968 building code, if you need to get technical. It hadn't been updated in a few years.
I'm not talking about a city building code. I'm talking about the Ohio Building Code. The law in the state of Ohio is the Ohio Building Code. As a building official, right, that has a requirement in there for you to administer the Ohio Building Code. Is that what you're saying, that was not taking place?
No, that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying was that there is an area between the ORC, which the Ohio Revised.
Actually, there is not for this particular project, but we can disagree about that. But it doesn't matter. I'm just asking, be a little bit more pointed, and if you were required to administer the Ohio Building Code or not in this particular case.
Yes, in this particular case, I would agree, yes, it should be administered, yes. What I'm saying is what the situation was in the administrative environment within the city at the time that this happened.
Which was 2000, what year was that? I think some of these permits were pulled in 18 and 19.
The permit was issued, I believe, in 19. Do you have any notes here?
February 8th.
February 8th of 19. The property was acquired at sheriff's sale after the owners died a few months prior to that by Miss Neighbor. What prompted this entire project was that historically, this was a restaurant on the first floor, clear span building, 25 feet wide outside to outside. And the only means of egress to the tenants upstairs was an open staircase inside the restaurant. And after hours and on closed days, there was a gate that was locked on that staircase. The restaurant was not open by the restaurant operators. The tenants upstairs were then forced to use a narrow exit stairway leading to an iron staircase, fire escape type that we see in Over the Rhine. That fire escape was their primary egress and ingress, and only egress and ingress during the closed hours of the restaurants. So to bring this building up to date and up to speed, the proposal was to remove that staircase and build an exterior staircase on the back of the building. Steel staircase was.
Let me interrupt you and ask the question. Are you saying that a single means of egress is adequate from a second floor for residential?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so the plan was to remove a stair and add a stair, and that was to be adequate?
The existing staircase on the fire escape 24-inch staircase would be remaining at the opposite end of the building, and the hallway to that building was being enlarged. So the risk factor has not changed. It has decreased the risk factor and gave opposite ends of egress and ingress on 3 units that had been there for 200 years. When you get into chapter 34 on the existing buildings and we start doing the trade-offs, we start looking at the risk factor.
You're going beyond, I think, what you're saying that you were doing with this particular case. So far, the testimony has been, hey, we were replacing some electrical and changing some finishes on those upstairs units. And now we're talking about chapter 34 trade-offs. I don't think you're being consistent.
I apologize if I gave the inference that we were only doing some minor electrical work somewhere or some finishes. No, that I did not mean to infer that whatsoever. It's what her project was.
Again, there's 4 permits, 1 for each of the 3 residential units and 1 for a stairwell.
Yes.
Is that correct? There is no permits for any other work like removing a stair or replacing 80% of the joists, right? There were no permits for that work.
That is correct. The 80% of the floor joists came into the office in, I believe it was the 2nd week of July. Darren Swikert of DSU Architects dropped them off at the office in July of 2019. I was on vacation. Mel McKenzie reviewed them with Mr. Swikert at that time at his desk and told him everything was fine. Mr. Swikert left. I came back from vacation a week later. They were laying on my desk. I had not had a chance to review them. I did have a set of orders against the mayor on a piece of property, and the mayor called me into his office and relieved me of my position that day. I left the office that day with my personal belongings. I do not know.
You just faded on us.
I was relieved of my job of the streets of Hillsborough that day. Know what happened to that time.
All right, you just need to speak into it, and someone may need to mute, but you're breaking up on us, Mr. Wiseman.
Okay, let me step back a little. Can you hear me at this point?
You're fine now. So
drawings,
you were relieved of your duties that day by the mayor. We got that.
yes. So the drawings had been, the updated drawings, what this project was approved as on Mr. Miller's original plan review was that it was a phased approval and we were doing as-builts or accepting Ms. Neighbors' as-builts were going to be addressed as the project progressed. There were a number of busts in the property description. So she was going to have the property resurveyed after the slab was poured on the rear of the building. And that was the tentative agreement between Ms. Neighbor, the Hillsborough Area Community Development Corporation, and the city safety director's office. So those as-builts were supposed to be shot, new survey established to be corrected, establish new benchmarks, and that would be the center hub of all the correct GPS located elevations, topos, everything for the downtown district of Hillsborough. Hence why they were not done at the time. They were to be provided as built. And again, in Mr. Miller's letter of the initial plan review on the footer foundation, the page 2 of that on phased approval, I'm sorry, on his correction list, item number 2, final construction documents shall be submitted and shall show items called out in section 106.1. That was going to be on the final construction documents of the as-built project.
All right, so
hold on a second. Are you trying to tell me that they're allowed to build the project and then submit construction documents after the fact?
Yes and no. We were staying in touch with I was staying in touch. Mel McKenzie was staying in touch. Steve Rivera was in the building multiple times. Paul Ayers, the electrical inspector for Hillsborough was in the building multiple times also as this was progressing.
So let me ask you this question, right? So, you said you were in Montgomery and Cincinnati before. Would any other jurisdiction that you've ever been associated with allow a project to commence construction without construction documents under the assumption that construction documents will be submitted after we're done?
Yes and no. Yes.
I've been an architect for 24 years, and I've served on this board for probably 6 or 7 years, and I've never heard of that before.
Tower Place Mall, downtown Cincinnati, conversion from the Crew Tower out area was a total construction as-built project.
Okay, so let me try. Wait a second. Let me try to just put this in some focus. We have a stop work order that Hillsborough issued to Miss Neighbor, and the stop work order is based on our review, or we have reviewed the information to determine compliance with the building code. Based upon our review, we must issue a stop work order. We have found that the following items don't conform to the building code, and that's what we list. And then Miss Neighbor has appealed that. And I guess I'm trying to figure out what the basis for getting out from under the stop work order is. It sounds to me as though, in a pure legal term, and this may not be apt for this hearing, is that you're saying that city officials, the city of Hillsborough, should be stopped to issue the stop order because they sort of enabled all this as it was going. Is that the basis for the defense to the stop work order? Under what basis would we find that the building code, that the project was in compliance with the building code? I guess that's the question. And I ask that to anyone, whether it's Mr. Wiseman, Mr. Rivera, or Ms. Neighbor.
I don't understand your question.
What's the basis for Ms. Neighbor getting out from under a stop work order?
The basis is looking for help from the board at this point.
I know, which is because the city was involved and had been in the building numerous times and had sort of enabled this build as you go process. Is that where we would exercise our discretion, which we have? We have the ability to exercise certain modicum of discretion, but what would be the basis for providing Miss Neighbor with relief from the stop work order? Is it that the city that it's a hardship because members of the city sort of tacitly or expressly assisted her and gave her a comfort level moving forward on a build as you go or as a renovate as you go? You see what I'm saying?
I understand exactly what you're saying. You're probably hitting the issue on the mark. The original footer excavations were approved, which is now on questionable land. The foundation was approved by inspection, which is now on questionable land. The water lines, new water service brought to the building, was approved by the Water Safety Services Director and the Utility Director, Sean Adkins. The same with the new 6-inch sanitary lateral, 200 feet. 200 feet of
those utility Mr. Weissman, on those utility connections, yes. Again, let me ask, were any permits ever issued for that work?
The city did not require permits for them, and the city did all the inspections on them, yes.
So the city did not require a permit to connect utilities into city-owned utilities?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
Let me ask Mr. Rivera. Mr. Rivera, what as a CBO, what's your position on, you've issued the stop work order. We'd have some discretion, as I indicated, to relax that, but what's the building department's position? Do you want us to uphold your stop work order?
Yes, sir. The city of Hillsborough was certified by the Board of Building Standards in 2014. There's been some other building officials prior to Mr. Wiseman, and they have abide by the building codes as far as the requirements. Here, I think we had an interest by a building official that runs contrary to the building codes. So what I like to see happen, which I think board members has mentioned and put out there, that in several jurisdictions and through the state of Ohio, that this is not normal. The normal process would be that, you know, prior to the building being erected, plan to be submitted. And in this case, that did not happen. It's on record that the footer foundation was only submitted for phase approval. I think maybe it was the wrong information that maybe Mr. Wiseman was given to the city. We're in the process now of correcting a lot of mistakes that have been taking place. And I think we got it down pretty well. So it's running pretty smooth. But this case, again, the only time that they came to light was when they asked for an extension. And that's when I discovered all these issues. Secondly, being in the building, I was in the building, I think, one time and thinking to myself, because I saw all the renovations going on, and he was still the building official at the time. And I was thinking to myself that, and I kept asking him, I says, we do have building plans for this. And he kept assuring me that, yes, we do. Because no inspections have ever taken place, and it's been over a year now that that building has been there and working on, but no inspections. There's been 2 inspections, one being the foundation, and then secondly, a trench for the electrical line. But there's no other inspections that ever been asked for or requested or done. So what I'm asking for, and to do it properly, is that to void out the residential permits and resubmit for a mixed use, separated mixed use, an A2, R2, and with the correct plans, and so it can be properly reviewed. As far as
your stop work order doesn't accomplish all that. Your stop work order just accomplishes.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. But what I'm looking for,
that's all this before us.
That's correct. What I'm asking for is the stop work order was for, first of all, that they don't own the land they're building on, and secondly, that this should have only been a phase approval, and we needed more documents to see if it complies with the building codes.
All right, let me exercise some of my discretion here as chair of the board. I mean, I've heard a lot. I've heard some interesting testimony, but I haven't heard a factual basis to void out to stop the stop work order. What do my colleagues think?
Mr. Chair, Paul Began. Yeah, I mean, let me ask one question, which is probably the biggest question at hand, and probably to Ms. Neighbor. Does she own the property of which the addition was started construction yet?
I thought I did. I purchased. Like I said, I
Did
signed
you get a title or a deed?
No. But I had sent them. I gave them a check. I signed a contract, and they were going to do it. And I never heard anything until this year, saying that with the stop work order.
Do you own the house that you live in, Miss Neighbor?
Yes.
Did you not get a bajillion documents from the title company when you purchased it?
The bank has it.
But do you recall all of those documents from the title company about the deed transfer and things like that?
I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm not an attorney, but normally when you purchase something, you'll get a piece of paper saying that you own it. So you are unaware whether you own that property or not?
I have a receipt. I have confirmation that, that I signed a contract and I wrote a check.
So just not to get too legalese here, but assuming those facts to be true, she might have equitable title. She may not have perfected legal title.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that exact comment that was just said, and Ms. Neighbor had only been notified that there was a defect on that deed with this stop work order when it was submitted from the city. She has every intention to proceed in getting that rectified immediately. She's actually had the survey company, McCarty and Hillsborough, hired to do the survey on the current as-built, even though the slab is not in place, what the original agreement was for. The as-built's being shot off of the foundation. There has been no construction done other than the floor joist replacements at this time. There's nothing covered. There's nothing else been done but floor joists being replaced as needed. The building has been cleaned out. The first part of the year it took to get the building cleaned out. There was going to be some modified plans made by one of her prospective tenants who was going to run the restaurant, and that plan has never come to fruition because that tenant developed a severe case of cancer late last summer. He was diagnosed. He withdrew from the entire project late last fall. So from July-ish, maybe August last summer, does that sound about right?
Yes.
July, August last summer, Mr. Smith pulled out of the project and notified her officially in, what was it, December?
December, 21st or something like that.
So 6 months the building sat from last summer to last winter, and then when the permit time came for renewal to stay within that notice period to renew the permits was when she applied for the renewal, and then had no response on the renewal, whether being accepted to renew or not to renew or any orders whatsoever. All of a sudden, 60 days further out of our 30-day turnaround window, a stop work order was received by Ms. Neighbor, who then called me regarding that.
Okay.
But her intention is to get this property transferred over. She's getting this. I think the survey was done. What did they tell you?
2 weeks, a week ago.
So it was supposed to have been done last week or 2 weeks ago. I don't know if it's been finished yet. I haven't seen it myself. McCarty and Associates in Hillsborough are doing that for her.
Okay, so I mean, she's not the record title owner. She may be the equitable owner. Who knows? But I'm still curious as to whether or not we have a basis to issue a stop to void out or give Ms. Neighbor relief from the stop work order. I'm interested in what my colleagues think.
Mr. Chair, again, Paul Began. I don't mind. Go ahead and I'd like to hear what the rest of my board members think here. And I might be a little bit outside my bounds by the statement, but I do believe Mr. Wiseman was completely negligent of his duties as the building official. And I think, Ms. Neighbor, I think you're getting not very good consult from Mr. Wiseman as well, too, in this particular process. So I think you're being directed incorrectly. What needs to happen in this particular case is first, Ms. Neighbor needs to get that additional property. That needs to become legally hers so that she can construct on it. How we got here does not matter at this point in time. So I'll agree with Mr. Rivera. Looking at the permits, because we have all the documentation that was provided, including the drawings that were submitted in support of those permits. I think those permits were incorrectly issued in the first place. Do not explain the extent of work that needed to be done under those permits, and does not explain the amount of work that needs to be done for the entire project as a whole. So in that case, I do believe Mr. Rivera is correct in not allowing an extension of those existing permits. One, for the addition because Ms. Neighbor does not own the property and therefore really has no legal right to be able to build on it. And number two, the permits that were enforced do not adequately show the amount of work that needs to be done. So again, I would agree with Mr. Rivera and be in favor of upholding the stop work order until all of this gets sorted out. I don't believe, at least from what I've heard from Mr. Rivera, that the city at this point in time is trying to make it difficult for Ms. Neighbor. I think really what has happened is Mr. Weissman's involvement has made it difficult for both parties. And I think if both of them can sit down with a discussion without Mr. Weissman present, or even being a party to consulting on those things, I think they can get to an agreement to allow this project to move forward.
All right. Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Wiseman.
First off, I'm sorry you feel that I had hindered this project. I have spent most of my career trying to progress and move projects ahead. The project, as in another, or a lot of other projects in Hillsborough. I've consulted regularly with Rob Johnson and Steve Regal, both at the board, because of the antiquities of the Hillsborough administrative section. I had done everything I could 12 hours a day on my time in Hillsborough to work this out, not just this project, but a number of other projects throughout the city, all across the OPC and the ORC, and update that program. And indicated we're trying to fix a lot of old problems. Not all those problems were not, I don't think many of those problems, or any, were mine. I think they were problems that had started before I got there by a number of other part-time inspectors that were there in the city using what they had to use with a overbearing administrative level who wanted to be involved in everything. I'm not passing that blame. The buck stops with me. I'm the one who made the decision. But with Ms. Neighbor, as in many other projects, I made a decision if I knew the person to stay clear of it and take it to the next level above me. And that's what I had done in this case. So the people above me had made most of these decisions. I was the person who had to sign them because I was the CBO.
Okay. Chip, your thoughts?
I would vote to uphold the stop work order. I mean, while I'm not going to comment on the past because it's the past, but the previous application and permit is expired, and the city has the obligation to look at this anew. And as the appellant has testified, the scope of work involved here, just with respect to the floor on the first floor, the joists, has exceeded what anybody had anticipated beforehand. So this isn't, in my mind, just an as-built situation. This is significant. It needs to go through the permitting process. So be it.
Neil?
I agree with my colleagues to uphold the stop work order, and I'll keep it at that.
Brad?
You're muted, Brad.
Yeah, I ran my printer and I didn't want you to hear it. Yeah, I think Paul is right that the original construction documents were inadequate. Really no fault of the owner. And I hope the city will take that into account. Just looking back at this February 2019 letter, on behalf of the city, they agreed to, she gave them $5,000 for this property additional property. And it said, based on an as-built survey of the building, that would determine the location of the property. So, I mean, she's, really, that's what she was told. And she's doing a survey now, so that should be, hopefully the city will still honor that agreement. Yeah, as far as the plans, I looked through the plans that were with the building permits. They were kind of sketches. And it looked like there was a starting of some architectural plans that probably need to be finished. So she needs to, I guess, get an architect to finish it. So, with all that being said, yes, I would uphold the stop work order, but I would hope that the city would work with her and not make her, one of the stop work orders says to remove the wall, which I think that would, shouldn't be necessary based on the original agreements. So I would uphold it.
Okay.
Excuse me, if I can interject real quick with the last point, the city is all agreed to help out Ms. Neighbor any way that we can, because we do want to see this happen. We just want to make sure that it's done correctly.
Right. I mean, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel for Mr. Neighbor here. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We just need a basis. We needed to make an informed decision as to whether or not the stop work order should be lifted, if you will, or remain in place. And that's really all we're here to deliberate on. And I think the consensus of the board is they'll vote in favor of upholding the stop work order with, as Brad said, my colleague Brad said, with the hope that the stream of commerce moves forward and Ms. Neighbor is able to improve the project. But, dotting I's and crossing T's according to the Ohio Building Code. So I think there's a point in the hearing where I'm going to entertain a motion if one is going to be made, but someone wanted to say something. I'll give Mr. Wiseman, Ms. Neighbor, and Mr. Rivera a last opportunity to make a record.
First off, I think there's a set of drawings that are missing somewhere that Mr. Rivera has not received. The architect of record has submitted a set of architecturals for the addition, the roof over of the staircase itself, and the new partition walls for the restroom, and the staircase being widened to the basement that had the overflow seating in the banquet room in it. But that set of drawings was submitted to City Hall in July last summer of 2019 during my vacation, which I addressed earlier. And I'm thinking Mr. Rivera has not seen those drawings. I did ask DS2, and Mr. Rivera indicated to Ms. Neighbor that he didn't see them early in this year prior to the stop work, that DS2 submit them to the city. They submitted a second set sometime in early February. I guess I don't know, did Mr. Rivera receive those or has he not received those?
I'm not sure, Mr. Rivera.
The only drawings that was submitted in the latest ones from the architect was the ones that were submitted for the record.
All right. Well, I think we're to that point in the hearing. I'd entertain a motion.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0040. The appellant is Paula Neighbor for the premises 122 North High Street, Hillsborough, Ohio. The appellee is Stephen Rivera, building official for the City of Hillsborough Building Department, and adjudication order number 2020-003-001. I move to uphold the order.
Okay, that motion to uphold the stop work order has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair. Chip Welch.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the stop work order has been adopted and affirmed. But Ms. Neighbor, best of luck to you, and I think you'll get things moving forward with the CBO in Hillsborough. We wish you the best of luck. Nothing further to come on that case. We stand adjourned on this case.
Thank you.
Let me, for the record, while we're still on, Tammy, we're almost done. Our 11 o'clock case, which was a Division of Industrial Compliance case, has been continued. That is case number 20-0062. and that dealt with property on State Route 95 in Fredericktown. That's been continued till 9/28 of 2020. Yesterday, we approved minutes from August 11th. We deferred setting an October date. I just looked, Susan, I have on my calendar an October 13th date already. Was that not the case? What does
Susan,
anybody else?
I can't hear you if you're speaking.
I can't hear her either.
Oh, okay.
I don't have anything on my calendar for October.
I don't either.
I don't know how I got that,
Yeah.
man. That's kind of scary. I've got October 13th. I don't know how I got that. Oh, well. Oh, you know what? That's the date my appointment, my commission expires. That's what. Yeah, because it says Board of Building Appeals appointment ends. All right, I didn't look at it. No, I had to open it up. All right,
You
so
need
I
to
don't
get
have.
your paperwork in.
Yeah. Chip, did you do that?
Not yet. I've got my stuff ready. I just need to submit it.
You just need to get your BCID criminal record, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what?
Through the post office?
Yes.
I'm available. Who wants to start? I have a out of town conference if it goes on the 8th and the 9th, U.S. Attorney's Conference that I generally go to and speak at. I
mean, I'll throw out as potential dates, either the 5th or the 12th and the 26th and the 27th.
12th is a holiday.
Oh, is it?
I could do the 5th, but I cannot do the 6th.
5th is good with me.
I could not do the 6th or the 7th, or the 8th or the 9th.
I can't do the 5th or the 6th.
What about the 13th?
That would be fine for me.
Yeah, I can do the 13th in the morning.
Did you say
13?
He said 13.
13.
Yeah.
1-3.
Fine.
And then 26 and 27?
Throw them out there.
Yeah, I can do those.
Yep. Likewise. Likewise. There you go, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve compensation for our preparation and attendance for both yesterday and today, August 17th and August 18th.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we stand to be approved for both of those days. Our next meeting will be remote, September 15th, 2020 at 8:30. It'll be on Microsoft Teams again. Hearing no new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. All right, we stand adjourned, subject to our next meeting being September 15th. Hey, Tammy, thanks for indulging us. I know it can be tough to report these kind of meetings with multiple speakers, but hopefully it wasn't too difficult for you.
No, it was my pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, see you guys.
See
Carl,
you.
Okay.
Whoa. Is everybody okay with the rule review? So I can move it on to legal?